The Spartan invasion of Messenia, also known as the First Messenian War, 743 to 724 BCE, was a significant conflict in ancient Greek history that shaped the destiny of both Sparta and Messenia for centuries. This war wasn't just a territorial dispute, it was a brutal struggle for power, land, and survival that reflected the intense competition between Greek city-states during this period. To understand the First Messenian War, it's essential to first explore the background of Sparta and its societal structure. By the 8th century BCE, Sparta had grown into a powerful city-state with an intense focus on military discipline and organization. Spartans lived under a unique social system designed to produce elite soldiers capable of protecting and expanding their territory. Every male citizen was trained from childhood to fight in the Spartan army. However, despite this fearsome reputation, Sparta faced a critical issue: it lacked sufficient fertile land to support its growing population. Messenia, located to the west of Sparta, was a rich and fertile region with abundant natural resources. Its rolling hills and fertile plains were ideal for agriculture, and its strategic location was a tempting prize for any city-state looking to expand its influence. The Spartans saw Messenia as the perfect solution to their economic problems, and this ambition sparked a conflict that would last for decades. Causes of the war: several factors contributed to the outbreak of the First Messenian War. One primary reason was Sparta's desire for more land and resources. As the Spartan population grew, so did the demand for food and agricultural produce. Messenia's fertile plains were seen as the key to providing long-term sustenance for the Spartans. In addition to economic pressures, there were political and social tensions. The Spartans, under their rigid oligarchic rule, had a deep-seated desire to dominate and control their neighbors. Spartan society was built around a warrior elite that owned the land, but the land itself needed a large workforce to cultivate it. Initially, Sparta relied on a system of semi-slaves called helots, who were subjugated people forced to work for their Spartan masters. The Spartans likely viewed the Messenians as a potential source of additional helots, which would ease the labor burden on the Spartan citizens and allow them to focus entirely on military training and governance. There were also cultural and historical tensions between the two regions. Messenia had its own traditions, culture, and identity, and while both regions were Greek, they did not share the same customs or way of life. Sparta, with its militaristic and austere society, looked down on Messenia's more agricultural and rural way of life. The course of the war: the exact details of the First Messenian War are difficult to piece together because much of what we know comes from later sources, which may have romanticized or altered the facts. However, the general outline of the war is clear. The Spartans, seeking to expand their territory, launched an invasion of Messenia around 743 BCE. The Messenians, realizing the existential threat they faced, put up a fierce resistance. This war was not a quick or decisive conflict. Instead, it dragged on for nearly 2 decades. The initial Spartan attacks were likely aimed at key strongholds and cities in Messenia. Early on, the Messenians were able to hold their ground, thanks in part to their king, Aristodemus, who is portrayed in historical accounts as a capable and determined leader. Aristodemus is a somewhat tragic figure in the story of the First Messenian War. He was not only a military leader but also a symbol of Messenian resistance. Under his command, the Messenians fortified themselves on Mount Itham, a strategic high point that allowed them to defend their territory from Spartan attacks. Mount Itham became a focal point of the war. It was a natural fortress, and the Messenians used it as their base of operations to launch raids and counterattacks against the Spartans. For several years, the war was characterized by a series of skirmishes and sieges, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. However, as the war dragged on, the Spartans gradually gained the upper hand. The sheer size and discipline of the Spartan army, combined with their relentless determination, began to wear down the Messenians. Additionally, the Spartans may have received reinforcements or support from their allies in the Peloponnesian League, a coalition of Greek city-states led by Sparta. The Messenians, isolated and outnumbered, were slowly pushed back. The war took a heavy toll on both sides. Spartan sources describe the Messenians as fierce and tenacious defenders of their homeland, while the Spartans themselves endured hardships during the long campaign. The war also had a psychological component, as both sides engaged in rituals and sacrifices to the gods, seeking divine favor for their cause. Aristodemus, in a desperate attempt to gain the support of the gods, is said to have sacrificed his own daughter, believing that such an act would turn the tide of the war. Despite this, the Messenians eventually succumbed to Spartan pressure. The fall of Messenia, around 724 BCE, after nearly 2 decades of fighting, the Messenians were forced to surrender. The fall of Mount Itham marked the end of the First Messenian War, and Messenia was now firmly under Spartan control. The aftermath of the war was devastating for the Messenians. Many were enslaved and became helots, forced to work the land for their Spartan masters. Messenia's fertile plains, once the source of their independence, now served to feed and sustain the Spartan state. For Sparta, the victory was a major turning point. The conquest of Messenia significantly increased Sparta's territory and provided the resources needed to support its militaristic society. The Spartan economy now rested on the backs of the Messenian helots, who were treated harshly and subjected to constant surveillance to prevent uprisings. This system of helotry would become a defining feature of Spartan society for centuries to come. However, the conquest of Messenia also had long-term consequences for Sparta. By subjugating a large and resentful population, the Spartans created a permanent source of internal tension. The helots outnumbered the Spartan citizens, and the fear of a helot revolt became a constant concern for the Spartan government. This fear drove Sparta to become even more militarized and paranoid, shaping its policies and decisions for generations. Legacy of the war: the First Messenian War was only the beginning of a long and troubled relationship between Sparta and Messenia. The Messenians never forgot the loss of their homeland, and their desire for independence simmered beneath the surface. Over the next few centuries, there would be several more conflicts between Sparta and Messenia, including the Second Messenian War, circa 640 to 620 BCE, in which the Messenians attempted to throw off the Spartan yoke. The war also played a crucial role in shaping Spartan identity. The conquest of Messenia reinforced Sparta's image as an invincible military power, but it also entrenched the system of helotry and the rigid social hierarchy that defined Spartan life. The Spartans became even more isolated from the rest of Greece, focusing inward on maintaining control over their helot population and preserving their military supremacy. In a broader sense, the First Messenian War is an example of the intense competition between Greek city-states during the Archaic period. Greek history is often remembered for the achievements of its philosophers, artists, and politicians, but it was also a time of constant warfare and rivalry. The First Messenian War highlights the darker side of this era, where survival and dominance were often won through force and subjugation. For Messenia, the war marked the beginning of centuries of oppression under Spartan rule. The region would not regain its independence until the 4th century BCE, when the Spartan hegemony began to crumble under the pressure of external threats and internal strife. In conclusion, the Spartan invasion of Messenia was a turning point in ancient Greek history. It reshaped the political and social landscape of both regions and left a lasting legacy that would influence the course of Greek history for centuries. The conflict between Sparta and Messenia is a reminder of the brutal realities of ancient warfare, where power and survival often came at the expense of freedom and independence.